Many people who are effective altruists think a lot about the future, and there are questions, of course, about how much we should invest in trying to prevent small risks that will become extinct. Another cognitive bias might be that we're not very good at taking account of small risks. We tend to dismiss them, and we don't think that the difference between, let's say, a 1 in 1,000 chance and a 1 in 100,000 chance or a 1 in a million chance is all that important. But really, when you think about it, if there's a lot at stake, there is a huge gain in reducing a risk from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in a million. It means it's only 1,000th as likely to occur. And if what we're concerned about is the future of our species, and if we do value the idea that there should be human beings in future, that if you like, the human story will continue, and that we hope that there'll be progress, and that we will solve the immediate problems we're faced with, and that therefore we will have eventually very large numbers of people, perhaps trillions of people or quintillions or larger numbers of beings who exist over many generations. Many effective altruists see this as a really important value because they think that that's a good thing, that people should flourish and have good lives. And if you can reduce the risk of extinction and thereby increase the probability that there will be these people living good lives, then that can be seen as an important cause to donate to, and one that has a high payoff in terms of cost effectiveness, given the number of people who will benefit from it. Now, not everybody thinks like this, and there is a philosophical question that it raises. Some people would say, look, I'm concerned about people who exist now, and I'm concerned about people who will exist in future, whatever happens. They'll say, yeah, it's very probable that people will exist in, let's say, 200 years' time, even if none of them exist now. And we wouldn't want to make their lives miserable by, for example, continuing climate change, or by leaky radioactive waste from nuclear power plants or something like that. But they will say, if people don't come into existence at all, they have nothing to lose. Nobody regrets never having existed, because if they never exist, they can't regret it. So some people think that this is not a pressing moral priority, to make sure that people do exist who would never know what they've missed out on is not a pressing priority. So they would see some kind of accident that caused the extinction of our species as a bad thing because it kills the 7 or 10 or 15 billion people on the planet at the time that the accident occurs, and they would see that as a terrible thing. But they wouldn't see it as a terrible thing because there are these huge numbers of people who would have come into existence had this accident not occurred, but now never will come into existence. So, in order to decide how concerned we ought to be about the risk of extinction, we need to reach a conclusion on that question of whether it is a huge loss of value if very large numbers of beings who would otherwise exist never come into existence. Effective altruists need to have some information about the consequences of their actions. Obviously, you can't be effective if you don't know what consequences they're going to have. But one of the problems is that when we get into the more distant future, it's very difficult to predict what the world will be like, and therefore it's difficult to know how much value to place on, let's say, preventing bad things happening. So some people might say, well, we don't have to worry about climate change beyond the next century, because if we go beyond that, there'll be new technologies. People will be able to take carbon out of the atmosphere cheaply and effectively, and will be able to manipulate the climate the way they want. Is that true or not? We don't know, and it would be good if we had some way of predicting whether it is true. And the same is true for almost any problem that you can think of, where we don't know what the world is going to be like, we don't know what technologies will be like, and we could easily waste money and resources in doing things that we thought would be useful that in fact are not useful for the world in future. Now, it clearly would be good if we could become better at predicting, but it's also very hard to do, because in a way, to predict new technologies requires predicting the discoveries on which they'll be based. And if we could predict those discoveries, we could make them now. We wouldn't have to wait around for 50 years for them to be invented. So I certainly think we should be putting more effort into trying to improve our predictions about the future, but I'm not very confident that we're ever going to be able to get to the stage where we really can foresee what the future is going to be like.